Catherine Ray, and I'm going to moderate this panel today. And I'm very pleased to introduce our panel, each of whom has some very exciting materials in each collection that they're willing to tell us about today. So, Maria and Leslie and Mark and Leah. Okay. So, let's start with Maria Mazenga. And Maria is with our Catholic University here in DC, and she's going to tell us about some of her special collections. So if you tell me which one of these is yours.
The one on the top?
The very top. We'll get going.
Are you going to stay up there and I'm going to talk here? Is that how we're doing it? It's fine with me.
You know what? Why don't you come on up here?
Okay.
Because then you can control this the way you want it done.
Okay, so open please, thank you. Whoever idea this conference was, I think it was multiple people's idea. It was a really great idea, and I'm really glad to be here talking about the collections that we have. So my name is Maria Mazenga, as Catherine said, and I'm the education archivist at Catholic University, so I run all the educational programs. I also make educational websites, so we've got lots of educational materials on our archives website. I gave you a handout. It has a list of the DC-related collections because I knew I wouldn't be able to get through them all in the short time that I have. So this is a very brief little overview, and I'm just going to highlight two particular collections. And then if you have questions on any of the others, I'm happy to answer those. We have 13 DC-related collections at the Catholic University of America Archives. So we're formally called the American Catholic History Research Center and University Archives. We're half a university records holder and half a special collections holder for different Catholic institutions, among others. Most of our collections that are related to Catholicism are national, like the National Catholic Education Association, what else do we have? We have the Bishops' Conference of the United States records, and if it's national and it's Catholic, we have it. But we do have DC-related collections as well. A lot of those are Catholic as well. So there's your list, and they're described on the paper that I gave you. We've got a total of 431 manuscript collections and 108 university records collections. Most, as I said, are related to the Catholic Church, specifically Catholic Charity. So if you're interested in Catholic Charity, we do have the Catholic Charities USA records and local Catholic Charity records if you're interested in charity in the District of Columbia. So as you see on the list, there are records related to those. Others relate to the Brookland neighborhood where we're situated. Our school was established in 1887 in a place that soon came to be known as Little Rome, because many different Catholic institutions made their way to the area. So Brookland really grew up around this kind of Roman Catholic identity, but then expanded outward. So we do have a lot of Brookland if you're doing neighborhood research related collections. For example, the Antoinette Margot papers, she's listed on your paper there. We only have one box of materials, but they're great photographs if you're into photographs. She was friends with Clara Barton. So she has kind of a more national significance because she was buddies with Clara Barton and lived with her briefly, if you're interested in that. Then I'll mention two that I think may have a broader appeal to researchers. And the first is a collection that I actually just processed. It's a fabulous collection. It's called the Cecilia Parker Woodson Collection. And it's kind of interesting because it's comprised of materials collected by Cecilia Parker Woodson, though there's only one letter written by her inside the collection. So she's the originator, the provenance goes to her. But it mostly consists of two sets of correspondence that are pretty valuable, I think, historically. As you can see, she lived 1864 to 1940. And the first set of letters in the collection that are pretty valuable, I think, are the letters that her future husband wrote to her while they were courting. So it's a series of over 100 maybe courtship letters from her husband. She saved all of them. And then from the early marriage years. So it's that set of letters, written mostly between 1891 and 1902. The second set that I think are even more interesting, because I don't know of much like this in any archive really. It's letters written to Cecilia by her daughter, Charlotte Virginia Woodson, while she lived in Peru with family friends. And she was part of the diplomatic corps circle, the diplomatic circles in Peru right at around World War I. So 1916 to 1918, Charlotte was her name, Charlotte Woodson. She would send letters home to her mother and tell her mother what life was like in Peru in those years. And she had her own courtship, and she would relay her own courtship experiences to her mother as well. And there's maybe 200 letters related to that. She eventually got married in Peru. There's a picture of the marriage right there, to a man named Victor Tyree, who was in the diplomatic corps. Then she became pregnant and died. So when I was processing it, it was a very emotional experience, because that cablegram, I read after reading hundreds of letters she had written to her mother, and then her husband announced that she had died in childbirth, and then the baby died as well. So it's a really rich collection of material, and it covers the period as 1864 up until 1920. It's the most rich. There's photos, if you're interested in photos, of from Peru and the Philippines, and of this family, this Woodson family, as well. So there's some nice photos and photographs in that particular collection. So that's one. And then the second collection I want to highlight, and I'm guessing we're going to do questions afterwards, so I don't want to talk too much.
Right.
So Terence Vincent Powderly, for those of you who aren't aware of who he was a labor leader from Scranton and Carbondale in the late 19th and early 20th century. Powderly ended up at the helm of the Knights of Labor, the largest labor union of its time period, and the numbers reached around 200,000 people, 200,000 members. So it was the first really big labor union in the United States. So he was the head of that labor union. And we have his papers if you're interested in looking at the papers. But why is that related to Washington, D.C.? Well, he was an amateur photographer, and he lived in Washington, D.C. because he later became the Commissioner of Immigration and the Director of Information for the Immigration Bureau of the United States. So he lived in D.C. And he took pictures all over Washington, D.C. in the early 20th century. And so this collection has all kinds of photos related to this. So the link is on your handout, and it's all digitized. So we've got about 1,300 of his images digitized. 900 of them are DC related. So if you're interested in DC, early 20th century, you can peruse that collection and do all sorts of comparisons or studies or whatever. So that's available to you as well. So that's it. I mean, that's kind of what I wanted to highlight.
Great.
From our collections. And
Thank you. Maria, thank you very much.
Sure.
Great. And we will have time for questions at the end. So I'd like to invite Leslie Nellis to come up and tell us about her experience in the archives at American University.
Right, so as Catherine said, my name is Leslie Nellis. I'm the Associate Archivist at American University Archives and Special Collections. I've been here for 5 years now, and my role has shifted from digitization now to more, I do digitization and collections management, and I'm excited to talk to you about some of our collections about DC. I don't know if a list has ever really been compiled of our specific DC holdings before, so this was kind of a fun exercise for me to take on. So Archives and Special Collections here has three main components. We're the rare book library for the university. We have about 14,000 volumes, and our strengths include things like Japanese woodblock prints, math textbooks from the 16th century through the early 20th century, and we have some small collections of DC-related materials that I'll talk about a little later. We also function as the university archive, so we chronicle the history of American University from its founding through the present. So if you're interested in the teaching organizations, president's papers, there's some interesting information about how AU has historically interacted with the larger DC community through protests, certain programs with mentoring DC youth. That information is all in the university archives. And then we have our special collections. These are our non-AU related collections, and these kind of have two small subcategories. Our general special collections are a couple hundred in number, and our strengths focus on journalism, peace studies, international development, and some social justice collections, to name a few. Like the collections at Catholic University, a lot of our DC-related material really relate to government agencies and national organizations, though we do have the collections I'll talk about in a little bit. I highlighted ones that focus more on DC communities to kind of give you that flavor as well. Inside of our special collections, we also have the Peace Corps Community Archive, which was started around 2013 to document the experience of Peace Corps volunteers. The Peace Corps organization is archived at the National Archives, being a government agency, but the experiences of the individual volunteers, that's what we do. And so it's really small collections of personal papers. We have about 180 individual volunteer contributions, which range from single items to multi-box collections from the first Peace Corps group through present day. And then another subset of our special collections is our enormous collection of playbills, international and national, ballet, opera, theater, Broadway, and we have a lot that relate to the Kennedy Center as well. So we're open by appointment, and we're located down the street in the Spring Valley building. And the easiest way to get situated with researching is just to give me a call or email, and I will be happy to help you highlight and locate any collections that might pertain to your research, or you can just request collections by name as well. So the first collection I want to highlight is this really interesting set of books called The Leaves of Wesley Heights. So Wesley Heights around Spring Valley is a planned affluent community here in DC. It was built up in the mid-1920s by this two brothers, W.C. and A.N. Miller, and they have a real estate company. And the whole idea was that it would be a planned community. In 1925, they started publishing basically a newsletter about the community. So these kind of function as yearbooks. They include calendars of events, feature House of the Month, talk about graduation, school activities, and any news from the company. So if you're interested in kind of Northwest DC in the early 20th century, these are a fascinating little group of books we have. A lot of people who use this collection are actually people who live in these homes, and they want to kind of trace the history of their homes. But they're really cool. I've put up a couple images of them. And we have, I think we're only missing 14 volumes, but our run is not complete. So just to note that. Our next collection that I want to highlight is the Patrick Fraser Political and Social Movements collection. This is a more recent acquisition. We got this in 2014 from Catherine Croy, who is married to Patrick Fraser. He was a librarian at the Library of Congress and also a photographer, an amateur photographer, though he did sell some photos to the Evening Star in town. You can find some of his photos in there. But basically, anytime there was something happening on the National Mall from about 68 to the late 70s, he went out with his camera and took photos of all the events, and also collected some of the ephemeral materials. So this includes over 3,000 negative images, all black and white, over 700 large poster, or over 700 flyer size that are more graphic in design, and also, lists of demands from various groups, and over 200 large format posters from various organizations. And this covers pretty much any major social or political movement during those years. And I think it's an especially rich collection because it also, the counterculture is represented, but you'll also get, we have some National Socialist White People's Party materials in here, which very interesting. Some United Hard Hat parties who were very pro-Vietnam War. So it has a broad range on the political spectrum of ideologies and various organizations. So it's a great, pretty rich collection. This is partially available online right now. It will be fully available online in the coming months. Right now it's about 50% up. All right, the third gem I want to talk about in our collection is the Shannon Lux Archive. This came to us in 2011 from Ken Lux. Shannon Lux was one of the largest DC-based real estate firms, and in the 20th century, it was a family-run business, the Shannon Lux families, and they sold divisions of their company in 1993. Over the course of Shannon Lux's existence, the firm offered services such as property appraisals, new building constructions, mortgage financing, insurance, sales, leasing, and property management services. So if you're interested in the development of Washington, D.C. and various neighborhoods, this collection is a gold mine of information. The bulk of the materials and the bulk time period, there are real estate appraisals from the 1930s through the 1970s. That's most of the collection. And what is so interesting about the appraisals they did is they often included neighborhood data, so little snapshots and write-ups about what given neighborhoods were like at the time of the appraisal. There's often photographs of the storefronts, properties, street fronts. So again, if you're looking for that historical view of how neighborhoods have changed or what neighborhoods were like at a certain time, this collection has a lot of that sort of information. It also contains things like administrative records of the organization, publicity materials, newspaper clippings of their various sales. This was the firm that was involved with creating the Sam's Park and Shop. So if you're interested in the history of like strip malls, for example, this collection has some relevant information as well. All right, the next gem I want to talk about is the Bannockburn Cooperators Incorporated. This is a great collection if you're interested in housing cooperatives and kind of suburban-ish development around the DC area. So this was donated to us by Bannockburn in 2014. And what we have from this collection is really the origins and building plans of this housing cooperative. In design, it was meant to be affordable housing for middle-class families. In reality, it was a lot more expensive than people had planned, so the kind of demographic they were hoping to serve didn't really match with its ideals, or with what actually happened to it. But again, it's a really fascinating collection of material. There's some oral histories in here, not very many, but the people who grew up in Bannockburn are a really active community and really invested in the community life that Bannockburn offered. It was built they bought a golf course and kind of built this planned community around it with its own shopping areas, schools, community centers, and so there are annual events and pageants and stuff that have been going on since Bannockburn was constructed in around 1950. And a lot of the community members have come back to the archive to actually find the original blueprints for their homes. There were like 10 types of home designs you could pick from, and so we have a lot of the various plans and iterations of that. Famously, or maybe part of the self-mythology of the community, they were very involved with the Glen Echo Park protests. I haven't been able to find a lot of documentation in our collection, but a lot of the oral histories talk about the legacy of social justice within the community. So there's that angle from this as well. And then the last kind of treasure I want to point out is a new initiative that we started in January this year, the Historic African River Road Connections. And this is a partnership ongoing with Dr. Adrienne Pine in the anthropology department here at AU. She's teaching well, I guess it just ended now, but a 2-semester course called The Craft of Anthropology with her graduate students, and they became embedded in several historically Black communities along River Road, like Scotland, Tobytown, and then the Macedonia Baptist Church in Bethesda, who has an ongoing fight for a cemetery that was paved over, and some very shady dealings with the HOC. And so her students were identifying a lot of documents and photos out in the communities, so we are open to donations from that community group if anybody's interested in submitting materials. So right now it's a small collection, but it's growing. We have the material from Dr. Pine's class that her students have collected. They've made a 50-page bibliography of materials. They're conducting oral histories with community members that are being deposited here. And a lot of the students have gotten really involved with the cemetery fight as well, so we have some documentation of that. We also just received the records from the Macedonia Baptist Church. We have a couple anniversary booklets from the Scotland AME Zion Church in the Scotland community, and a couple things related to the baseball teams at these various communities. So some of this is available online, and we also have a designated portion of our website dedicated to this collection. And as I said, this is just brief. I wanted to point out some of the samplings that really focus more on the community aspect, but I wanted to talk briefly about other holdings we have. We have a number of amateur photographers who shot DC, so you'll see pictures of the National Cathedral, some old city guides visiting Washington, DC, posters from the 2017 Women's March, some of our Kennedy Center programs. We have a really cool lantern slide collection highlighting the protests and occupation of the Bonus Army, and things like the national records of the Women's Strike for Peace office. They put up their famous disarmament coloring book that they put out to great controversy. We also recently acquired the United States Capitol Historical Society collections, and a number of our AU faculty papers are actually early AU faculty who also had been working in government, so there's a lot of government type related collections in our holdings as well. And I've also made some handouts to pass out, or people can come up and grab them when we're done. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you. I'd like to welcome Mark Greek up here. Mark is with DC Public Library, where I used to work many years ago. So please come tell us about your collections.
Nope, no. Not what I wanted to do.
Do you want to make it full screen?
Yeah, oh, there it is. I'm missing the button. Not seeing things. Hi. As I said, I'm Mark Greek with DC Public Library. I'm the Archival Collections Coordinator with Special Collections there. And unlike my university brethren, I can't think of that, but we're sorry. Our department and our library is focused solely on the district. We collect around that. We don't have any outreaching. There's a tiny bit of smattering into the suburbs, but not really anything outside there. So special collections, sort of a weird term for a public library, but it was a joining of several divisions in together internally, and then a new name placed on top of that. We trace our roots back to 1905 with the creation of Washingtoniana. The then director of the library, Dr. Bowerman, thought it would be, and I love this quote, a prudent idea to start collecting in matters of local history. That idea sparked what would become Washingtoniana and collecting in local history. Primarily a book collection at the beginning, the collection has grown to encompass all formats and all types of collections from there. The combining to create special collections happened only about 7 years ago, and at that time we absorbed the Black Studies Center, which was created in 1972 with the opening of the MLK Library, and the Peabody Room, which had always been loosely attached to special collections, but now was formally joined in. The Peabody Room is a Georgetown-specific collection, and it is located at the Georgetown Neighborhood Library. As you know, our building is under renovation, so if you go down MLK, you're not going to find us there. You'll find a tarped building, last I saw. Currently, we're located at 4340 Connecticut Avenue, which is building number 52 on the UDC campus. It's the law school. We occupy, if you're looking at the building, we're on the lower left-hand corner of the building. It's the site of where the Cleveland Park, the interim library was while they were renovating the Cleveland Park Library. In the latter part of 2020, and that's what they keep telling us, latter part of 2020, don't ask what that specifically means, because I've asked several times, they just keep telling me latter part. I would assume the fall of 2020, because all our money's tied fiscally, and so I would assume the fall of 2020. We're going to reopen up at MLK in a newly redesigned building. That space is going to feature a lot more space for special collections than we've ever had. We're actually tripling our size with a larger reading room, a larger staff room, and a very large storage space for our collections that continue to grow. Rather than talk about specific collections, I'm going to talk about genres of collections because we have a very large collection of material. So political figures is sort of one of the highlights of things that we have. I'm highlighting 3 different collections that are processed, or I'm going to put that in quote, processed. Julius Hobson, Josephine Butler, and Hilda Mason, which is currently undergoing a reprocessing of material. So those are council members that we have all of their papers for. In addition, we have unprocessed collections that were donated to us within the last decade or so. Arrington Dixon, Charlene Drew Jarvis, and Kathy Patterson, their papers. We're currently working actually in negotiations with 2 more local leaders that are going to be actually significant collections. So each of these collections have a variety of different things going on with them. So if you're highlighting some political leaders, we have political leaders for you. The bulk of our collection, though, it revolves around organizations. I like to say our collection tends to be more organizational focused and activist focused. So that's sort of just DC. It's all kinds of organizations in the city, and they're all activists in some manner. Some of the organizations I want to highlight are ECTC, which is Emergency Committee on the Transportation Crisis. They fought the development of the Southeast-Southwest Freeway. Since it's there, they lost that battle, but they won the battle against the Three Sisters bridges. So if you're looking at an activist organization, community organization, fighting development in the city, this is a great collection for you. We are also the repository for the League of Women Voters, Neighbors Incorporated, Downtown Progress, and DC Citizens for Public Education. The organizations run a whole gamut of things, and there's all kinds of different activities. The picture of the bicycles from the Capitol Bicycle Club, which we hold their records as well. So there are a bunch of different smaller community, very, very focused organizations as well. Photographs are usually our most requested item. We hold as most commonly used is the Washington Star photograph morgue. When the paper went out of business in 1981, the photos were then donated to the library in 1983, and we have been working to make them more accessible since that time. That collection is a little over 1 million photographs in that collection, documenting everything. Sort of, if it appeared in the newspaper, it's going to appear in our collection here. There is a time range where there's a slight difference. So the bulk of the collection of the Star collection is like 1965 to 1981 when they went out of business. Anything prior to 1935 seems to have been discarded by the paper at some point, so most of those images don't exist. But we do hold print editions of the paper that we have reproduced images that way for people. The historic image collection is sort of where we stick all of our loose images that are donated to us. Somebody walks into the library and says, I have these 3 photographs, that's where they end up. In there, they're all organized by subject or biographical terms. But despite these 2 larger collections, there's a lot of gems within the archival collections of for those looking to illustrate any type of work. Hugh Miller was a photographer for the Washington Post. His most famous photographs are, he is the photographer that got the only interior shots of the Knickerbocker Theater when it collapsed during the 1923 snowstorm. He smuggled in, he smuggled in his camera, posing it as welding equipment, and was able to gain some interior shots of the theater. Herman Steinberg is a local amateur photographer who really liked the built environment and went around just photographing buildings in the district. We have 4,000 pictures of just churches. Chances are, if it's a public building of some sort, he would have photographed it. Joseph Curtis has lived in Southwest, so he documents that neighborhood really well before the construction of the Southeast-Southwest Freeway, which destroyed that neighborhood. And Edward Fletcher is a new photograph collection that we just received. He's an amateur black photographer, and he's shooting sort of societal. If you follow us on Facebook or get our newsletter, we've been featuring images from his collection, and that image actually is from his collection, because we've been finding such great gems in there that show a different side of the African American community that we've not seen before and documented before. He got access to a lot of different places that normal photographers didn't go, and because he was skilled photographer, the photography is just outstanding there. We do collect in a lot of different other areas. We have the personal papers of people and scrapbooks and all the other fun things that you would normally find in an archive. Ephemeral items. We recently started, just prior to moving out of MLK, we started collecting in local music, specifically punk, and then later go-go. We added both of those. The punk collection is deeper than the go-go collection right now, but we're working with some neighborhood partners to bulk up those collections and get a lot of great material in for those musical genres. We've also started just recently, within the last year and a half, starting collecting digitally and born digitally items. So we've been grabbing websites, blogs, and other things and capturing them sort of how they appear now. We're archiving for the future, so that we can see that we started around campaign sites, because everybody runs for mayor, and then 5 minutes after the election's over, their sites are gone. And that's where they contain most of their information. So we've been starting to grab those so that when somebody studies an election, they'll be able to understand what all the variety of candidates actually stood for at the time. That is spread out to a bunch of different things, including Twitter, where we're grabbing specific hashtags and following the comments on specific hashtags. Recently with the go-go music, where they wanted to turn off the go-go music at the club, we grabbed all the hashtags associated with that. And the initiative for servers and fair wage for servers. We looked at documenting that as well. So we've been doing a lot more in the digital realm of collecting. Digital collections live in Dig DC. That's our digital archive, where we house a lot of different things in there. For great things we've been doing, one of the things we've been doing with the digital archives is looking at smaller independent newspapers. Washington Post, Washington Star, they've been digitized by big companies. We've been going after some of the smaller ones. We have an agreement with Washington Blade where we're digitizing the entire run of the Washington Blade. We're up to 1993 available. We have the entire thing digitized. We've collected Washington Free Press, which is a little independent newspaper. Unicorn Times, Quicksilver Times, which were great with music. We have several others that we've digitized already that just aren't here. available yet. We've been trying to negotiate with the city paper, but they just don't want to talk to us. Because wonderful. We have it already digitized. It's available in-house only, thanks to Yale University and a professor who needed it digitized, so Yale paid to digitize it for us. So thank you, Yale, since they have nice deep pockets. And so yeah, that's available in-house, but we're trying to make that available outward so that people can use it a lot better. Of course, there's photographs and maps and lots of oral histories. We've digitized all of our legacy oral histories, and we've been making those available as we get the metadata backends all completed, and ephemeral items as well. If you're studying very old DC or commissioner era DC, we've digitized the commissioner reports, and they're all available actually in the Internet Archive, but we're the ones that digitized it and stuck it in there for everybody. That was actually our first digitization project. So the collection, what do we hold? We hold roughly 2 million photographs, 60,000 books, 8,000 maps, 18 terabytes of digital material. Vertical file is something that librarians started collecting at a very early time. Their files arranged on a subject. We have 80 filing cabinets of vertical file. That post that starts just after World War II goes to about 2005 when we capped the collection. Prior to that, they were scrapbooks that the library created based on specific subjects. Periodicals, we tend to try to grab every little periodical we can that was produced in the district as we find even just single issues that we'll have. Archivally speaking, we have 268 collections. 21 of those are being currently worked on by staff and being processed. And as you can see, we have a larger backlog than we do a public facing. I think that's the same with any archive. We do average about 2 new collections every month that come into us. Recently just brought in a funeral home and a church, Turner Memorial, their records. But we are working to so one of the things that we've been doing with our material is in this time of MLK is making sure that the items that we have in backlog will be adequately described so that when we return to MLK, all of the backlog items will be available to look with the understanding that they are unprocessed and they are what they are. So you'll have access to a lot more stuff once we return to MLK. And we've been able to get a greater hold of understanding of what we actually hold and describing it. So we're here to help you. You can contact the library. You can call us or send us an email. Archival specific, use the archives .dcpl@dc.org for your specific archives questions. Visit us on the web to find out more. You can follow us on Facebook, as I said, and other social media platforms to see random things that pop up. We did launch a new archival management software called Archive Space that allows, for the first time since being at MLK, one of the things that if you've used our collection before, you've known that a lot of the materials we hold are sort of hidden, not by choice. It's sort of just how the library sort of did things. This now allows cross-collection searching that we've never had before. So it's opened up greater access to our material, which is wonderful for a researcher. And we are continuing to add a lot more stuff in there. And eventually all those unprocessed collections will be made publicly available. They're all in there now, but you just can't see them. So, all right, I'm available for questions afterwards.
Great. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you. So Leah Richardson is now going to talk to us about George Washington University and some of the fascinating things that we as researchers can find there.
Hopefully, that's what I'm going to do.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. All right, so hi, I'm Leah Richardson. I'm a special collections librarian at George Washington University in the Gelman Library. And I am really glad that I'm going last. I loved hearing everyone talk about their collections and seeing how we all kind of like fit together nicely to tell like multiple sides of this picture of the history of DC. So thinking about this talk, I give this talk a lot, and I say the same thing all the time about like our collecting strengths, like all this stuff up here. We have these themes and these topics, and I just wanted to try something a little bit different today. I give this talk to students and classes and tours. And I feel like this approach, sometimes when I do it, I'm just like throwing the kitchen sink at you and like, we have so much stuff, you could never possibly comprehend. And we do have a lot of stuff. But I think it does a disservice when I try to just like focus on the stuff and so much of it. And it does a disservice to the collections and to the people. So I thought I would take a different approach today, and I like really thought about what gets used and how it gets used. Because I have the privilege of working with these amazing collections and working with all kinds of users and seeing what they see in collections. I'm constantly learning new things all the time. So that's how I'm going to focus my talk today. But I want to start with this emphasis on the people because we are open to the public at Gelman Library, even though the library, the general library, is not. You have to be in the consortium. The public can't use the library unless they get a sponsorship. But Special Collections on the 7th floor, we are the only place that's open to everybody. And that's really important to me and to my colleagues that we highlight that any chance that we can get. And so we take this as our collecting statement and our access statement on our website. We take it really seriously. And I understand that just saying something is open doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't still these barriers to access. So this is just me saying out there today, everyone can use us, and so if you tell a friend, then maybe more people will know. And so everyone tell one person that you know after here today. So I want to talk about our collections in terms of the strengths that I see in the reading room and on email reference that I answer. And I teach a lot of classes. We have a really active instruction program in Special Collections, and we host GW classes, and we will host outside groups and tours. This past semester, we were very lucky that we were able to support 2 classes from AU, Dan Kerr's Public History. Say hi to everybody, Dan. There he is. So his students came, and they met every week in Special Collections, and it was wonderful. And so I would say our strengths here at GW are mid to late 20th century political community activism around the topics, and I put urban renewal first because that is a strength for sure in a lot of the collections, and I just highlight some here. We have like 800 collections again, so like I picked what gets the most use and that are like sizable collections. So we have a lot of people that use our DC collections that come from all over the world, all over the country. And DC, because of our collecting practices, we're the home of the University Archives too. DC is a thread that runs through all of the collections. So collections might document DC history that aren't necessarily part of Washingtoniana, which is like the weirdest word. I wish we could just like get rid of that word, right? Just call it DC history. So urban renewal is really popular right now with a lot of dissertations being written. I've had a bunch of Michigan students, they're interested in DC history in Michigan for sure, but DC is an excellent case study on urban renewal, gentrification, revitalization, right? It has a lot of names. And this is a huge topic that our collections support from a number of different perspectives, from the political, from communities, from developers. And I loved hearing about these AU collections and getting that sort of like real estate and developer side, thinking about how they connect. And then the community activism and politics around these issues. The Community for Creative Nonviolence, I want to give a shout out to that. Those 3 collections that relate to that group. We have a really strong holding that documents the work that they did to bring attention to the issue of homelessness. And then home rule, that's another big area of strength that we have. And this DC Statehood Constitutional Convention transcripts, I'm going to talk about that like pretty much every slide. That's my current favorite collection. I have many. So we also welcome students. So you might be here thinking about your research, but you might also be thinking about classes that you teach. And so we welcome I welcome any idea, just contact me. I'm pretty much open, and not to keep picking on you, Dan, but we loaned him a bunch he has it in his house. He took archives home. It's in your office. All right, I'm gonna check on it. So there's no idea that's too wild for me, and usually my dean, she if I'm she's like, do you feel that the collections will be used and they're safe? And I'm like, yes, and then she usually goes along with it. So contact me with any ideas that you might have. We have a very active exhibit loan program, and we do loan out materials. We also participate in interlibrary loan, and I will interlibrary loan rare books. Maybe not the papyrus, but we are really committed to access. That's my biggest point here today. So I encourage anyone with interest to approach me with your idea. So within these collections related to these topics, we have people. I wanted to talk about people again. So the people in our collection: Walter Fauntleroy, Nadine Winter, Mitch Snyder, Geneva Valentine, Jim Graham, they're not all up on the screen. But I could point to them, I guess. Tacey DeChanicus, Ethelbert Miller, Lou Chabarro, Marita Golden, Grace Cavalieri, I think I got everyone. Oh, John Wilson. And so we have these people, right? They're papers, but also these papers that are attached to a person's name really document sort of these other anonymous, the other side of DC, the other side of history that often isn't reflected in archives, but it's maybe just a little bit hidden. So these are the communities, neighborhoods such as Adams Morgan and Shaw are particular strengths, Brookland, the LGBTQ community, and poets. We got a lot of poetry. We have the DC Poets Archive. And so I also wanted to talk about people in terms of me and you, so the archivists, all my colleagues here, and librarians who collect this stuff and make it accessible and describe it and build amazing tools for you to use. We also have archive space, and it is really great. We have a new database for searching our materials. It makes it just so much better than the old flat finding aid approach, so I'm a big fan. So I want to come up here today and tell you what we have a little bit, but we have so much more, and I want to empower you to go and use our websites and use these tools that we create and search things and email me. And we have digital collections, so you could go right now on your phone and check out the Marion Barry 1978 Campaign Oral History Project, and we made you these nice little URLs so they're easier to remember. And then the DC Constitutional Convention, Statehood Constitutional Convention transcripts, which I've just started really digging into. So the reason I want to point that collection out, and I'll go to my next slide, this is a question, we get a lot of questions about this collection, and so we do things in the archives world pretty much everywhere, right? We decide what we can digitize based on what people want, what gets asked for a lot. And we have active council members who were coming to look at these transcripts from the Statehood Convention that happened in 1982. And so we were like, let's digitize them, because we couldn't find them online in the complete set. So we did this. I'm really proud of the work that we did to digitize this entire collection. And it is just so, I don't know if you can really read that from here, but go to that website and just start reading it. The transcripts are amazing. The people that are there are interesting, and there's these other little parts of the story. When we teach with archives, I often tell students to just look for a name. Who's that person, right? Who's this delegate on the Constitutional Convention? Go find out what she did. And it's sort of an avenue. And then we have these other websites here. So we have that link will take you to that page about here are all our collecting strengths and topics. And that's our website, and that's our collections database, and that's our email, and that's all I got. So you can email me or ask me questions, or use the website. So thank you very much for your time. I'm really glad. Thanks for organizing. This is really, I love talking about our collections. So,
Great.
yeah,
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. So let's check the time, 11:37. We do have time for questions. Does anyone have a question for our speakers? Yes.
I do have a question. Some of the items that were mentioned, I've searched on and haven't come up with them. And so I'm wondering if there's a, and maybe I'm missing this because I don't use these archives very often, but how do you identify things across different archives, or is it necessary to only search within the archives, which means you need to have a sense of who holds what? And I actually worked in special collections as an undergrad for several years. So this is
Do you mean
very
across
interesting.
institution or within an institution?
Across institutions. So if I'm looking at, Northwest DC neighborhood, and I've searched, for example, for Neighbors Inc. before, and I've never seen that archive
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
on Neighbors Inc. How would I have come up with that if I wasn't on the DC Public Library website? Would it have come from a Google search, or do I have to go specifically to your websites knowing that, maybe one of the DC schools might have it, or, let me start with AU and then go to GWA and go to Georgetown, or would there be some common way of identifying these resources?
There are a couple of databases, like Archive Grid, some of the,
I'm not a big fan of archive.
no, it's very difficult to use, but I think some of DC, isn't some of DC's,
It's really Google. Like I just
Yeah,
will say, that's the best. I used to try to. I felt like we weren't allowed to suggest Google. There was like that moment in librarianship, like no, use these other things, and I'm like, no, Google it. That's kind of the best way. There is Archive Grid, but people have to participate in it, and I just have never found it to be like super useful. And I answer that question a lot. So if you can't find it on Google and you email a place in DC, like people email me all the time, and I send them to DCPL, or like, oh, we don't have great collections, or like, right, like the punk archive. We did like one punk exhibit. Now everyone thinks we have punk, and I'm always like, every day I think, I'm like, no, that's DCPL. They have that. We don't have that. We just one time we did that exhibit. Yeah, like, and that's a common problem, like what you're describing. That is like, how do we make that better? And using tools and putting this stuff online and having Google crawl it is the closest we can get to it.
There have been, so I've been with the library for 16 years, and in that time period, there have been multiple conversations between heads of institutions of creating a portal for DC collections, never coming to reality. But yes, Google's going to be the best way, but the library's collections, and why you probably not found Neighbors Inc. is that for a long time our collections have been hidden in public, in plain view. So there was no sort of data out there for Google to grab. But now things that are in archive space, Google can grab those
Right.
things. We just never had, we had only internal stuff. We don't participate in Archives Grid and other places. For a place that has 400 archival collections and we don't have any presence out there. It's sort of the library directorship is always asked, why isn't everybody using our collections? I'm like, well, no one knows we have them, so that's sort of the age-old problem. But
it is the age-old problem, because I worked in Washingtoniana in 1981, and we were talking about that then.
yeah.
And there was no internet. But the other thing, too, is the DC Library Association is celebrating its 125th anniversary, and one of the reasons it was formed was to share information about who has what collection. And we're still struggling. But, I work here at AU, I'm the librarian, and I'm happy to help you because I knew where Neighbors Inc. was.
Yeah, and if you call one institution,
Right,
we
right.
know,
We pretty much know.
we pretty much know who has what. Yeah, or email. Sorry, email.
Yeah, email is better.
We can point you in the right direction, and all of us are willing to do that.
You have another question? Yes, hi.
Hi, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I want to know if there are some collections that comes from top down, particularly because much of it is community values and so on. I research on international relations, looking at some of the documents, particularly George Washington has the National Security Archives, and Catholic University has the Oliver Lima Library Archives, particularly on Brazil. Can someone also in the audience also talk about what sort of documents, what sort of places that an international relations scholar has to be familiar with in terms of accessing the archives or having new set of documents available for research at the top-down level from at the, for international relations researchers.
Well,
Go ahead.
you mentioned the Lima Library. Yeah, we have the Oliveira Lima collection. I don't work directly with those materials, but they're Brazilian and in Portuguese. If you know Portuguese, that helps. But that's accessible. There's a librarian there, and you can come and look at materials related to that collection, mostly early 20th century materials. There's that, but we also have the Bishops' Conference papers, the USCCB. The interest there is they have a very large international network of activities. Of course, it's religious inflected. It's the Catholic Church's activities all over the world. Another would be missionary activities. There are several missionary collections that if you contact me, I can connect you with that. And religious orders, religious order materials, they have a lot of international materials as well.
Yeah, and I'd say GW, so the National Security Archives is wonderful. That exists through
Yep.
FOIA requests. There are just people there that as soon as documents become declassified of the government, they request them, but they're not technically part of, they like basically rent that space inside the library, but they have, I mean, we know them, they're my colleagues. But, so they have a broader focus, whereas like our special collections, we really do like have to limit like what we can take because we don't have that much space, and we have, you know, in the city we have other people collecting other things. So our stuff, we do have some like national, like we have the Teamsters Archive and we have the National Education Association. But we also have an area studies collection that is open also on the 7th floor, where everything for the public is on the 7th floor of the library. We have the Global Resources Center, and you do have to make an appointment, but they do collect current primary sources in non-Roman script languages mostly. And so they have a Mideast and North Africa collection, Russian collection, and Okinawa. And they have and like there's a Taiwan collection. So that's like one thing, but really depends on like what's your topic, you know. Not to say like I'd have to Google it. I probably would, but like I get this question. We have a lot of students in international affairs at GW, so often I'm helping students look for stuff that like, oh, you might have to travel to look at that, or those are government documents that you might not be able to access, or something like that. So it just depends.
Depends on time era too.
Yeah.
Library of Congress holds a lot of
Yeah.
material, 19th century.
But there's an amazing proliferation of databases of primary source materials. And if I knew how to make this show what I'm seeing here,
Escape.
anybody know?
Control F8.
Well, we can close, would you close this?
Anyway, there are a lot of primary source databases that almost all of our universities have, and if DC Public patrons want to come here to the library, can use. Okay.
There you go.
No, if I can make that bigger. Okay, so this is our library's homepage, and I'll bet you GW has something similar. We all use these subject guides, and if I could type, it would work. But there are so many of them that this is our whole thing on how to do primary source research, but there are just, I mean, there are databases of the newsletters from the Japanese internment camps, Topaz and Manzanar. There are the digital security archives that come out of GW. There's a database here that we subscribe to. So I really would encourage you to, I got the 5-minute warning, would really encourage you to take a look at these, and those from other universities. I'm sure you subscribe to similar things. Yes?
First of all, I just want to say thank you. I feel from working in many of your spaces and with many of you that we're just in a great place with a great collection of people who are building and sustaining and making accessible the collections that are in your institutions. One question I have for you, obviously, there's only so many seats at this table, but if you were to think about some of the places that are not represented here that have substantial DC collections, how might you characterize their strengths? And like, when might you go to Howard? When might you go to Nero? When might you go to DC, the City of DC Archives?
Howard, for sure, has amazing collections.
Very deep.
Yeah,
Very
really
deep.
deep. And I couldn't even like characterize the strengths, but I know a lot of times with the topics I talked about earlier, like home rule and statehood, there's lots of like, oh, they've got the better guy, right? Who's even bigger, like more involved in these issues, right? So yeah, I would just say like really deep. We were a part of a grant with them a few years ago to describe a bunch of collections, and I mean I think a big problem for a lot of the universities, I maybe could say, is like the space issue. We all rely on offsite storage, and then staffing. Libraries don't always get all the funding that we need, and so we run like really lean operations, and so often it takes money to describe these things. But I would say Howard's collections are incredible.
Yeah, they're in the Moreland Spin Garn.
Yeah.
And they have things like, they have oral histories of the riots where they have anonymous, because the people, what they were engaging in was illegal activity, but they talk about, it's really a rich collection of those oral histories. How are we doing? Okay, anybody else want to comment?
The Carnegie Library, that just reopened?
Yes.
Okay.
The DC, that's the Historical
DC
Society. That's
okay.
the Historical Society.
Is that connected to you?
No.
No, that's separate. That's got its own,
Other
sorry,
than
but
they-
Washingtoniana.
Yeah, well,
I know.
our Special Collections has been researching out new names, so Special Collections as a name is going away at the library, and they stole our name. DC History Center, they are now calling themselves.
Yeah, they just reopened.
They're going to start taking appointments in July, I think. The building is open, the exhibits are open, but the library is not open. I would classify their collections as local individual rather than local organization. That they have more personal papers and photographs that way than they do have organizational records.
The Library of Congress has some really good local history materials too.
Yeah. And there's still stuff hidden out there, and this is why when you talk to somebody in the Wilson Library, you can find those things. So, you know, you were searching alley life in DC and you didn't know where to go. You'd have to go to the DC Housing Authority, who has an incredible photograph collection on alley life in the district. Incredible photograph collection. But you wouldn't know that because it's not out there, but all of us know, sort of, oh, that's where that weird thing is. Or what's the Chevy Chase Historical Society got, or Tenley or.
Oh, well, we're going to find out what Tenley has. The Tenley Town Historical Society is in negotiation with Leslie right now to take on what materials they have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should make a page of all DC related
You know,
collections.
these subject guides are so
we should
easy to
that.
do.
I know, yeah, but we should have a page that has everything.
Yeah, no,
That we
right.
could just send someone to that page. I'm just putting that out
Yeah,
there.
no, I agree completely.
Yeah.
And it's so
I mean,
much
I would
easier
put-
now
I
than.
would be happy to help even
Yeah,
get
because-
other collections.
Collection, though, wouldn't it? Or that would be a pretty big page, wouldn't it? I mean, you just listed.
Yeah.
By subject maybe,
Yeah,
like a
but-
subject
no,
guide?
but yeah.
I don't know what it would
This is the age, the conversation I've been in several times between institutions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's sort of how far down. And I know that the director of the Historical Society, when he came, he started trying to build a list of cultural heritage things in the city. And he was soon at like over 150 different places that had like little tiny niche things. So this city's,
yeah, yeah.
Sort of like New York, it's tough because there's so many little institutions that all have little things.
So, I'm sorry. Can I ask one more question?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so and I've worked with your search engine and with yours in that search across the collection. I mean, would it possibly be? And there are ways in which Google would never replace what the strengths of some of the things that we're able to do with your search engine. in some ways.
Google's a
I
better
mean,
search
is
engine.
there, is it, this is probably naive of me to ask, but is it inconceivable that there could be ways in which you use similar search engines?
No, ArchiveSpace has the capability of cross-institutional for the subscribers to that service. And so you could get all over the US of anyone. Whether there's a portal for it, I don't know. I think it has the capability of doing it, but it would require somebody leading the charge of that, or whoever is managing the bigger database.
And if you're in the WRLC, all the WRLC schools, we all use the same catalog, and we have an integrated library system. So if you have a MARC record for your finding aids, then you're going to be discoverable in the catalog at the collection level usually. So using and I have a lot to say about the library catalog. That's like another. It's not as great for special collections, sort of very like specific type searches, precision, but it's in there. So there's ways, I think that like the consortium, we are like in the next phase after implementation of this catalog. I know at GW, like now we're addressing some of these other issues of like the discoverability of special collections we lost a lot with the new catalog. And so we're working to
We
address
lost a
that.
lot with the new catalog, period.
We did.
Yeah, but this is the subject guide that I put together for AU, but it's available to anybody in the DC local history, and I tried to put in, different tabs for different aspects of studying DC, and I'm happy to add to it. It's really easy if anybody has any ideas. Washingtoniana figures prominently here in my libraries. So any other quick questions? Because I think we're just about out of time. I'm getting the nod. Well, I want to thank everyone so much. It's been really interesting for me to revisit some of my own history and to learn about new things. And so I thank you very much for taking your time, and for all of you for asking good questions and being here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.